Hi, my name is Joseph Parker, WBA champion of the world, and you're watching Sporting Icons.
Welcome back to Sporting Icons. Like the video, drop a comment and of course subscribe. Luis Ortiz, who is currently 27-0, undefeated Cuban, and the mandatory for Anthony Joshua's WBA super title, is saying that Joshua is not allowed to fight Klitschko. In fact, he's not allowed to even fight Kubrat Pulev. He must face Luis Ortiz next. And apparently he has a letter from the WBA with a contractual agreement saying this. And if they were to break it, then they will be open to a lawsuit. And this is what Ortiz's manager, Jay Jimenez, said. He said, Joshua can meet with Tim Klitschko and anybody else all that they want. But I know when we spoke to George Carmenta, who is the president of Dade Promotion, Luis Ortiz's promoter, he stated that in a letter from the WBA, there's a contractual agreement from the WBA. And if they break it, we will win a lawsuit and expose the WBA for violating the Muhammad Ali Act for intentionally hurting a boxer's career. So, what he's saying is that the WBA were unaware of this whole rematch thing to start with. And I'm pretty sure that's true. Because when Joshua and Klitschko signed their contract, Eddie Hearn, Bert Monty, they threw in Klitschko's standard contract, which means if he was to suffer a defeat, he's allowed a rematch. This happened with Tyson Fury and now with Anthony Joshua. The difference is with Tyson Fury is that Joshua was a champion. Against Joshua, he wasn't. Okay, he was bringing the WBA super belt with him as such because the WBA agreed that Klitschko can fight for that title against pretty much whoever he wanted, and he wanted Joshua. But anyway, Jimenez went on and said that Luis has been training hard this last month and he will come in at his best shape that he's ever been coming in at, but he's been frustrated with the WBA hold-up. So really what they're saying is that they should be the mandatory. They should be next in line. They have a contractual agreement from the WBA that states this. And if they don't do it, they will sue the WBA and maybe force the WBA's hand, if you like, into saying to Joshua, you must face Luis Ortiz next, not Klitschko, not Pulev, because if you don't, we're going to strip you. So this is one possibility. But me, like you, like many others, were under the impression that, again, coming from Eddie Hearn and other sites and that as well, that the WBA had agreed with the IBF that Pulev can go next, and their mandatory challenger, who happened to be Luis Ortiz, can then fight the winner of Joshua Klitschko after Pulev. This was the original agreement, as far as I'm aware. Now, I do believe that the IBF and the WBA knew nothing about this rematch clause. So, of course, when it was announced after the fight, after Joshua won, that there's a rematch, they had to ask for an exemption from the IBF. But what they haven't done is ask for an exemption from the WBA. But even without that, the WBA have said to Luis Ortiz, you can fight Joshua next. Just let him do this fight with Vladimir Klitschko, as in the first one, and then straight afterwards, you're in pole position, you get to fight the winner. Now, I remember something along the lines of Luis Ortiz was picking Klitschko to win, and he was expecting to face Klitschko next. But when you're a multi-champion, which Joshua is, when you've got the IBF and the WBA, and of course the IBO as well, which nobody really cares about the IBO, but the IBF and WBA, as in the main belts, it's difficult when you've got mandatories. And this is one of the things that's kind of annoying me a little bit about the fact that there is a rematch clause in the contract that Eddie Hearn should never, ever have signed. There was no need for it. Because like I said, Vlad wasn't the champion. He had no rights for a rematch because he wasn't the champion. But Klitschko has said that he didn't want to fight Joshua again in the UK. Fight pretty much anywhere else that you like, but you need to tempt me into taking the rematch. If not, then I won't take the rematch. And Eddie Hearn is doing everything that he can to make the rematch. And as a consequence of this, he could end up losing Joshua the WBA belt. In theory, he could end up losing Anthony Joshua's O record as well, in theory. So it's a fight that didn't really need to happen. There was no real need for the rematch. Now, a lot of people want to see the rematch. I do too, but not at the expense of losing your title. You can't do rematches when there are mandatories. Eddie Hearn knows this, but he sees Joshua as above the belts, as above the governing bodies. But he's not. Yes, he will still have a fan base, but it won't be as big. If he's stripped, his fights won't be as big. People have been on the road with Joshua, supporting him from day one, supporting him with the getting the belts, the IBF. When he beat Charles Martin, everyone was like really happy. And then of course up against Vladimir Klitschko, everyone's really happy. So the last thing in the world that we want to see is our champion being stripped. And if Eddie Hearn has messed this up, then shame on you. What, for money? Shame on you. It's not like Joshua isn't going to go fight Pulev and Ortiz for a couple of quid. He's going to make good money. So what's the problem? It's not like he's fighting for $500,000. He's still going to be getting like 3 or 4 million. So what's the problem with that? Now Eddie Hearn wants him to be earning 10, 20 million per fight. That isn't always going to happen. And if you think Joshua is above the belts, then you are sorely mistaken, Eddie. Sorely mistaken. He's not. They dictate who their champion fights. If you don't want to be dictated to, don't fight for the belts. Very, very simple. But you chose to go down that route. You wanted the WBA belt. You did everything that you could to get the Klitschko fight for the WBA. And now what? You're going to be stripped for it? Why would you sign a rematch? Why would you do that? I can understand Joshua signing one because he was a champion, but Vladimir wasn't. Yes, it's in the contract, and now they are obliged to do it. But you're not obliged to go bend over backwards and give Klitschko whatever you want. Klitschko says, I want this. I want these gloves. I want to fight in that stadium. I want this. I want that. And you're going, yeah, okay, Vlad. No problem, Vlad. Anything else, Vlad? It don't work that way. He's a challenger. You dictate where the fight's going to take place. If Vlad isn't happy with that, then he doesn't activate the rematch. You can then move on to your mandatories, which is what he should be doing anyway. For me, yes, I would love to see the rematch. But like I said, not at the expense of losing a belt. I mean, come on. Now, maybe the WBA, maybe they agreed all this with Eddie Hearn, but kind of like put Ortiz on ice, if you like. Now, Ortiz is avoided, that's for sure. Joshua, Eddie Hearn, never talk about Ortiz anymore. Ever since that he left the Matchroom for that 2-fight deal, he just doesn't mention Ortiz. So something's happened behind the scenes. What we hear is that he agreed to sign with Matchroom on the understanding that he fights AJ. And Eddie Hearn didn't come through with that. Now there's a reason for that, probably because Ortiz just didn't get the market. Because against Malik Scott, awful fight. One of the worst fights we've seen in a long time. Against Dave Allen. He was supposed to have blasted out Dave Allen. No problem. But Dave Allen stood there toe to toe with him. So Ortiz didn't have the market. Now people want to see Anthony Joshua take on Ortiz much more than they do Pulev. But as far as we were aware, the WBA agreed with the IBF that Pulev can go next. They probably didn't agree with the whole Klitschko thing because as far as we know, the WBA haven't even been spoken to about this rematch. So it seems that Eddie Hearn is thinking that Joshua is above the boxing rules, above the law if you like, but he's not. Now hopefully this is just a case of there's some kind of misunderstanding somewhere along the lines. The WBA will uphold their original plan of Ortiz will fight Joshua or even Klitschko after the rematch, then after Pulev. Now there's no guarantee that the rematch is going to happen, but Eddie Hearn is doing everything that he can to do it. Now he may well get the fight, but if Joshua gets stripped of the WBA, why would Vlad want to take the fight? The WBA is what he considers the best belt. It's his title. He held that for a very long time. He got that from David Haye. So He's not going to want to fight just for the IBF. He ain't going to want to do that. He wants the WBA. So he's in a catch-22 here. He either fights Klitschko, gets stripped of the WBA, and then Klitschko says, well, you know what, I'm not fighting you no more. Or he says, screw you, Klitschko, we're going to go fight Ortiz now. And Klitschko goes, you're contracted to me. So either way, he's going to get sued. Now, whether or not Ortiz can sue Eddie Hearn, we don't know. It's more a case of they can sue the WBA. But however much that Ortiz will get, I'm pretty sure Eddie Hearn will probably stump up maybe half of that to pay off Ortiz. But of course, if Ortiz goes too far with this, he's risking losing the mandatory shot. He's done this before with the WBC, quite similarly, where he got tested with PEDs and he got dropped. And he's pissed off a lot of sanctioning bodies, which is why he wasn't ranked for quite a long time. But he's been consistently ranked for, what, 4 or 5 years now. And yet he's never been given a shot. He had the opportunity to fight Wilder. Wilder turned him down. Nobody wants to fight Luis Ortiz. Even Tyson Fury said a long time ago that nobody wants to fight Luis Ortiz because he's dangerous. But for me, I want to see Anthony Joshua go up against Luis Ortiz. I want to see that fight. I don't want to see Joshua stripped because Eddie Hearn has got money in his eyes. Because if he tries to make this fight go ahead, he's going to get stripped of that WBA. Joshua isn't going to be able to fight Vlad. That means no money. That means no belt and no fight with Luis Ortiz either. So you're stuck with Pulev, and that's it. Now maybe Eddie Hearn wants this because he wants to be fighting Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder. But would Wilder or Parker be interested in Joshua for just the IBF? Maybe they would, maybe they won't. Because either way, he does bring money. But if he's being stripped for fight avoidance, and that's pretty much what it will be, then that's going to hamper his reputation. Like I said, I know Eddie Hearn thinks that Joshua is the bee's knees, and maybe he is. But he's still early in his career. And I don't want to see him stripped of a belt for fight avoidance. So this brings back to my original point that the Vladimir Klitschko Anthony Joshua rematch should not be happening, and Eddie Hearn should not be going through the mill, flying to America, flying to Vegas to try and secure the MGM Grand. He doesn't need to be doing that. Very, very simple, as I've said before. Klitschko, you have a rematch. You shouldn't have had it, but you do have one, and here it is. We're fighting in Cardiff. Are you interested? No, I want to go nowhere in the UK. Okay, fine, screw you then. Go fight Deontay Wilder for the WBC, as you are ranked in the WBC now. Go do that. And if you win the belt, come see me. So anyway, that's the news right now. Luis Ortiz could be suing the WBA because he's under the impression that he should be fighting Joshua next for the belt. So let me know what you think about it. Like the video, drop a comment, subscribe.